Well, hello, friend. Welcome to the first inaugural podcast of Selling Among Wolves Without Joining the Pack with your host, yours truly, Michael Pink. Now, it's been a long time in the coming. I've done hundreds, if not thousands, of videos and blog posts and radio programs and all that kind of stuff. But a podcast, this is a first. So here we go. We're going to be doing this on a very regular, consistent basis to get the word out. We've got a strategy that is a mammoth strategy, one that we're going to actually help our clients do as well. But we're going to do it right here, right now, starting with this podcast. You're going to love what you see. Now, every week I'm going to be bringing forth a podcast that has a particular message where we're applying biblical truth or natural law to the sales and business process with incredible effect. Now, if you don't know me, I've done a lot of things with business. I've helped one company go from nothing to, well, they had 12 agents. They were down to 3 looking for work. And I was asked to help them out. And 12 months later, actually 6 months later, because I joined them in July, 6 months later, they had a 9.3x return. That's a 930% growth. And we ended up finishing a 2.5-year period with 113x, 113 times where they were in the previous year. So we've done some pretty amazing things by applying biblical truth to business and sales in particular. I'm going to get into that today, but I got one in particular I want to share with you. And I'm calling it the most misunderstood or the most, maybe the least known secret for business. Others might refer to it as the most overlooked secret for business. But it's a powerful one, and it's misunderstood so much. It's found in Matthew 20, and I'm going to read the text to you, and then I'm going to give you a light on it you may never have seen before. Are you ready? It says, when the 10, now get the picture here, 2 disciples, they were talking about who's the greatest and so forth, and they were having this conversation. And when the 10 other disciples heard about it, they were indignant with the 2 brothers, and Jesus called them together and said, boys, come here. Okay, I'm paraphrasing. He says, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. Now, you've heard that, and probably like me, you've heard it taught like this. Okay, don't try to be great. That's a wrong thing to do here. What you need to do is like clean the toilets, be nothing, be nobody. Don't strive for great accomplishment or recognition or any of those kinds of things. Be a nobody and just work real hard and ignore everything else going on around you. But I got news for you. Here's what Jesus said. I'd never noticed this until recently. He is criticizing the path, the commonly accepted path and lifestyle of those that are in authority or want to be in authority. They want to lord it over them. They want to exercise authority over them. Let me tell you how that works in sales. Okay, you ready for this? I was raised on this back in the 70s. I know what I'm talking about. And it's been around for decades, if not longer. They say in sales, he who speaks first, how's it finish? You know the expression, right? He who speaks first loses. That's in other words, when a salesperson asks the question, asks for the order, and then he's supposed to shut up and not say another word. In the meantime, the person you're asking the question to is supposed to squirm until he gives in or she gives in and signs the contract on their life or whatever it is, right? And so, but that is wrong. There's no way in business God created it so that I win and you lose, or you win and I lose. That's not the whole spirit of what's intended in business. It should be a win-win situation. Now, so Jesus, now notice this is very, very important. He says, not so with you. You're not going to have authority, or you're not going to use your selling skills, your high-powered closing techniques, your ability to negotiate powerfully, amazingly, to lord it over them, to have authority over them, to get what you want, regardless of what's in their best interest. You're not going to do that. If you really want to be the greatest, he says, whoever wants to be great among you, give it up. Oh, he doesn't say that. Wait a minute. He doesn't say whoever wants to be great among you, shame on you. That's bad, bad, bad. No, he doesn't do that at all. He says, whoever wants to be great among you, here's how you do it. Here's how you do it. You got to be your servant. You got to be a servant. Okay. Now, let's talk about that. What does that mean? Well, the word there, servant, in the Greek is diakonos, something like that, whatever it is. And Jesus is showing you, he's saying, let me tell you how to be great. Let me tell you how to be great. And I don't mean great like so often in church circles, especially they say, great, like he scrubs those toilets, he sweeps the floor, he mows the church park, the grass, the grounds, or whatever it is. Those are all good things. I don't put them down at all. But that's not necessarily greatness. It's a good thing. But if you're called to higher things, think about, as I talked about in my most recent video, I talked about Winston Churchill. When he was in the Boer War in the 1898, 99, 1900 time period, he was a soldier, right? He's going into battle with his company of soldiers on horseback, and they're going in there ambushed. They're ambushed. And it surprised everybody. So his company just split. They went the other direction. But he turned his pony around, and he raced directly towards the enemy fire. He said he took out his pistol and he dispatched one on the left and dispatched one on the right. And as he's writing this letter to his mother, telling her about this, he said, I was as cool then as I am now writing this letter. Why? Because he knew he was being preserved for higher things. Okay, so you're preserved for higher things. I believe I'm preserved. We're destined. We're called to higher things. And that's a very important thing. So let's bring this back into service. Okay? The higher things that Winston Churchill was called to, by the way, it wasn't cleaning toilets. It wasn't waiting tables at a restaurant better than anybody else. He was called into leadership in the free world, a very, very important role. He said to save London and to save Britain from disaster, which he was credited with doing. So let's get rid of the idea that it must mean that you got to clean toilets or sweep the floors. Okay, so desiring greatness is a good thing. Otherwise, Jesus wouldn't have said, here's how you do it. He didn't say, don't desire that, boys. That's wrong. That's not. No. He said, okay, let me show you how you do that. And the word there for great is the word in Greek, megas, megas, where we get the word mega from, okay? It means this huge thing. It's like in business, the way you do this. Okay, I'm going to serve my customer. I desire to be great, so I'm going to serve my customer. How? I'm going to create so much value for them. See, most people go into business thinking, what can I charge for this? How can I get the most out of the market? They look at the marketplace as their land of opportunity, and how can I derive and suck out as much money, if you want to be honest about it, from them as possible, versus what Jesus is saying, yeah, you may have a measure of quote-unquote success. You'll be like some of the other rulers who lord it over people, but if you really want to have the most success, find ways to give out the most value, provide the most value you can. I tell my clients, if you want to do really well, always be with when you're talking with your customers and your clients, think of ways that you can provide the most value for them. In other words, if you have a cost-effective, $100 thing here and a $200 one here and a $500 one here, and they provide different levels of value, you're obligated, I think, to provide the highest amount of value that your customer can justify and afford, whatever that is. You don't say, well, I don't know if they're going to go for the $500 price. I'm just going to do $100. I don't know if they're going to go for the $50,000 thing. I'm just going to go for the $2,500 thing. No. You say, what is going to provide the highest level of value, the most help to your customer? And that's where you should do. I mean, after all, if you think about it, business is really three things, right? You have to create value, you got to sell the value, and then you got to deliver the value. Those three things, you do those things well, you're going to do extremely well in business. And so think about serving the customer as not cleaning their toilets, cutting their grass. Serving the customers is providing the most value you can possibly provide them. And it doesn't mean, by the way, like, oh, I can provide them more value, I'll just give them all my stuff. It doesn't mean that at all, because you won't be around to continue that. So you're going to provide them the greatest value you can provide, and then what you do is you set your pricing as a reflection of the value that you're providing. So I said in the blog I wrote the other day, if you think you got something that's, I don't know, let's say you're asking $1,000, or it's got a value, a recognized or perceived value of $1,000, and you ask $2,000 for something that is perceived in the market to only be worth $1,000. If you do that, lots of luck making that sale. You might, but not so much, right? If you ask $1,000 for a service or a product that has a perceived value of $1,000, you'll likely invite competitive quotes. They're going to check around and so forth. It's not a bad thing. I'm just telling you that can happen. If you offer that $1,000 thing for $10, they're going to think, okay, something's not right here. Something's not right. and they're not going to likely trust you. They're going to think, oh, this is kind of like one of those timeshare deals. You ever been to those? I hate to admit it, I have. And hey, you got to have a wonderful weekend at this beautiful resort in Gatlinburg, where we were one time, or some other place. We did it in Gatlinburg, and but they just just to watch a little presentation and so forth. But what they do is, you get the nice resort, and then you get into the room where the presentation is, and then you hear the doors bolted, and they got these big iron bars that go behind. I'm kidding, they don't do that, but they lock it up, and then they don't let you out until you've turned blue from holding on and holding your breath or whatever it is. In other words, they use many cases, not all the time. Not all timeshare people are like this, believe me, but the industry as a standard is known for, hey, maximum pressure, just like Donald Trump says he's going to put on Iran. Maximum pressure. And that's no way to sell. I mean, you can do it, but it's not the right way. So we're not going to apply maximum pressure. So when you go too low, people think, something's not right. If you go too high, they're not going to do it. If you're just going to value for value, in other words, if I'm selling you a dollar bill for 4 quarters, or 4 quarters for $1, it's like, what's the deal? It's kind of even Steven, right? So what you want to do, and this is important, you want to be able to provide enough value, as obviously as you can, that makes them feel foolish for not accepting your offer, while not going so low that it seems like something's not right, and not going too high that puts them standoffish. So you have to find that equilibrium, and oftentimes it may be a 10-to-1 ratio. Like provide, like for example, I helped a client on a project, and I went there for I think a morning or half a day, whatever. It was $4,000. This back in the 90s, and they had a big problem they couldn't solve, and they had paid many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to big international corporations that could not solve their problem. And I went in there in one day with the wisdom of God that I had learned from him the night before, believe it or not, the night before. I said, God, help me. And we turned that thing around in one day. A week later, the result was an 80+% reduction in the problem. The next week it was down to, it was another, it brought it down. They were like having 100 or so of this type of problem every day, and now first week it was down to 20 something, the second week it was down to single digits. Like, how did you do this? It was amazing, and I only charged $4,000 for it. Well, I could have, but I didn't know, frankly, how it was going to work, because I'd never done what I did there before. But that was probably worth, if I probably could have said, if I can solve this and get you under this, what would that be worth to you? And they probably would have said, well, I don't know, some nice big fat 5-figure sum. And then I could have said, okay, let's do it. And if I did it, I could have got a lot more for it. That's a great value proposition. I didn't do it that way. Frankly, I didn't know whether I was going to be able to help them or not. I had this confidence in the inside of me. I can do this, but I'd never done it before. So we proceeded like that. But anyway, it was a great thing. But so greatness, get this picture. This is very, 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 very important. First of all, greatness is encouraged. Jesus says, here's how to do it. If he wasn't trying to encourage you to be great, he wouldn't tell you how to be great. Secondly, when he talks about service, that does not mean just cleaning the toilets. It means putting the customer's needs first, finding out what they need, finding out how you can fill their life with value. And the more that you can add value to their life, the more you can serve them in that capacity, whether it's make their business more efficient, make them earn more money, or make their hair, I don't know, brighter, blonde, or whatever it is they do, whatever people want. To do that better than anyone else, and to do that with excellence, what's going to happen is your business queue, Q-U-E-U-E, I think it is, your line of customers will start forming up and say, I want to do business with you. So focus on, how can I impact the marketplace with high value? How can I give them the most value? How can I provide them the most value? You're sowing into a field, it will bring results. If it's true value, if it's hype, not so much. So you got to really have the goods, you got to have the value. But then Jesus does something kind of interesting. He increases the ante. Not only does he tell them how to be great, but then he says, here's how you can be first. First! What? There's a place for first? Yeah, he does. And the Greek word for first is protos, P-R-O-T-O-S. That's the word it's used, where we get our word prototype from. And he's saying, you can be first, okay? And the word protos kind of captures the meaning of firstness. Being first, whether in time, rank, priority. It highlights what stands at the forefront, the earliest, the highest, or the chief among equals. There's this preeminence. There's this strategy I talk about called the strategy of preeminence. I didn't even create that one or invent it. I learned it from somebody else. I'll tell you his name later if I remember it. But anyway, I learned it, J. Abraham. That's who I heard first talk about the strategy of preeminence, which is a great thing. I want to give preeminence. I want to do this to somebody else. And what happens is you become the preeminent or the first one in the marketplace, the highest quality one. That's what you can become. But how? How does he do that? See, because in business, great service is great, right? You got to have that. It means unmistakable value. That's what great service looks like. Great products. I've provided unmistakable, undisputable, incontrovertible value that means a lot to me as a consumer. And it makes for a great business model. But what does it mean to be a slave? Because he says, look what he says here. Let me see if I can find it. He says, whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. What? Just as, he explains it, he says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. Matthew 20, verses 27 and 28. It's in the same parable there. He's telling the story. So like, okay, greatness I can get through service, but to be first, what, I have to give my life a ransom for many? What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that look like in business? Okay, and this is an important thing. It's not saying, okay, you really want to win these customers over, go lay in front of a train and say, this is for you. And no, that's not it, of course not, okay? Here's the thing. The word for slave, and I'm going to share my perspective, I think, frankly, what you need to do is think, how do you do this? How can you do this? What is the difference between being a servant and a slave in business? What does that look like? Think about that, pray on that, and I'd like to see what your answers are, what you think about it, but I'll tell you what I think about it. That's why we're on the podcast, okay? The word translated as slave in the Greek is the word doulos, D-O-U-L-O-S, doulos. And in the ancient world, there was a difference between a doulos, a slave, and a servant, diakonos, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but there was a difference between the two of those. They were not the same thing. In ancient times, a doulos, a slave, was a person under another's authority, legally owned or bound in service. Sometimes individuals actually sold themselves into that kind of servitude, they call it a bondservant, to pay off debt or to secure protection. This arrangement made them a doulos, subject to the master's will. Catch that. Now, a diakonos, servant, somebody, if you're Greek, you can tell me how to say that word. I'm going to say it like this, diakonos. A diakonos, servant, still retained personal autonomy and had specific recognized responsibilities. They served, but they were not owned by anyone. A doulos, a slave, had virtually no rights and owed absolute obedience to their master. Now, in today's context, I'd submit to you that doulos is about complete submission, not to the man, not to the client, complete submission to the Lord in business, to Jesus Christ. Why? Think about it. If you're a believer, if you're a follower of Christ, remember what it says? You and I were bought with a price. How much was it? 30 shekels? No, it was the blood of Jesus. We were bought. Now, here's how I apply doulos in business. First of all, I say to myself, I am not a slave to any man. Therefore, I am not going to be doing something for a customer or servant or a client that I don't think is right. I mean, let me tell you something. I had a client one time. They weren't my client yet. Big company, had about 300 employees, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood. Big company for me. And I had just done training for their competitor. And they heard about it, and they called me and said, hey, can you come and help us? And so I negotiated a conversation with them, and everything was fine until they said, we want to see the training manual that you created for them. The inference was, if you don't show me, you're not getting the deal. And I said, well, I can't do that. That would violate the trust. Now, see, I was there to be a diakonos, a servant, but I was not going to be a doulos. I was not going to be owned by them. This one man insisted that I provide that training manual or forget it. And by the way, this became a contract that was worth a couple $100,000 for me. So it was a big one. At that time, the biggest one I'd ever done. And so that's what they were projecting. It's like, you have got to do this thing. Well, I didn't want to do it. And I didn't. Why? Because I am not a slave to any man. I'm not a slave to any client, prospective client, or customer. Remember that. I am bought with a price. You were bought with a price. If you can remember that, it'll be a big deal. Because he, Jesus Christ, he owns me, lock, stock, and barrel. So while I'm business serving my clients, he sometimes he gives me some very uncomfortable directives. And he'll say, I want you to do this. I want you to talk to this person about that. I know it can make a lot of people nervous. Oh no, what's he doing here? Listen, all my clients make really good money. They get really good returns. That's not the issue. But sometimes he asks me to do something that I'm very uncomfortable with. But I recognize that the opportunity is because he made it possible. The opportunity is something that he put me in for his purpose, and he owns me. Therefore, as a doulos, I am not subservient to the client in that respect, the total ownership to do whatever they say. I am subservient to Jesus Christ, do whatever he says. And he told me there was this multinational life insurance corporation out of the country, out of America, wasn't based here, wanted me to come and do some training. And they made it clear that, we know you're Christian and everything, but do not use any biblical references. Do not quote the Bible. You might be able to say something, but don't say where it came from. You can say, without a vision, the people kind of get mixed up or whatever. But don't say Proverbs 29:18. So that was kind of the gist of that. And so I didn't really like being told that, but because I'm not owned by them, you see. But I don't have to accept that if I don't want to. I don't have to accept their offer if I don't want to. But I asked the Lord about it, and he said, I want you to go there. And he said something very, very interesting to me. He had something he wanted me to do. And I was like, what do you want me to do? He said, I want to start a fire there. And I knew what he meant by that. What he meant was, I knew what he meant. You're going to find out what he meant. He wanted me to, in a sales training setting, with a professional company, with a multinational life insurance corporation, at a hotel, where all the other people are brought in, I'm supposed to give an invitation at the end of that for people to receive Christ. Now, I've been doing training for a long time. I never had done that. I'd never even entertained the possibility of doing that. But that's what he put out in front of me. So I said, yes, sir, because he owns me. Christ owns me. He said, well, what about the owner of the company? Well, they said you shouldn't do that. So I flew down to Barbados because Jesus, told me to do this. So I go down there, but here's what I did. I had dinner with the president of the company the night before, and I said, listen, I feel like when I was praying, and he was a Christian, by the way, and I felt like the Lord wants me to give an invitation at the end of the training. Are you okay with that? And he looked at me like, oh, I've never had that question before, never even thought of such a thing before. But he said, I guess that'll be okay. So I got his permission. The next day I did my training. There were 45 people in the room, 45 salespeople in that room. And at the end of it, I told a very amazing story, an illustration really, one that God gave me many years ago. You can find it on my blog. It's called The Glove you put on your hand. And I used that illustration. At the end of it, I gave an invitation. Not one, not two, but the entire room came forward like one man, and they received Christ individually, one-on-one prayer, while the president sat in the front row and cried like a baby. 2 days later, 3 days later, whatever it was, we went to another country, and we did another group of salespeople, another 30 of them in a different country, and had the exact same response, same result. Everybody came forward. In fact, on the first one, they were filming the training, and so they hired a local film crew, a film company, whatever it was. I don't know, somebody local. They brought in to film all this for future training. At the end of it, when everybody was left, and the film guy, it was recording, the video guy, he's packing everything up, and he says, "Hey, can I get in on that too, please?" And he wanted to pray and get the Holy Spirit and to be born again, and whatever that was we were talking about, he wanted in on it. That's pretty amazing, because you see, I don't work for the client. I'm going to serve them. I'm going to be a good diaconess. I'm going to be great at that. But I also recognize I'm a doulos, and if the company says that's okay, you be a diaconess, a servant, and be a doulos, because we know who you work for. If he's got something else, we want it. Now that's pretty cool if we can do that, and that's exactly what we did. So listen, if you like this idea, if you think I'd like to learn some biblical strategies for succeeding in sales, you might want to consider joining the Jesus School of Business. Go to michaelpink.com/Jesus School of Business. I think it's Jesus-School-of-Business-. It's in my blog. Go to michaelpink.com, go to the blog, you'll find an article about this, you'll see the link right there. But go there and take a look and see what's involved We've got hundreds of students that have enrolled in it. Maybe it's right for you. I don't know, but check it out and see if it is. And then listen, if you have a business and you've got maybe a few employees and you're thinking, I would love to 10x my business, how do we do that? Understand, first of all, it is a qualitative statement before it's a quantitative statement. When you get that, then you begin to realize, oh, I get quantity through quality. It's the same when you buy a diamond, right? You buy a diamond ring, and if the diamond's a bit flawed, got some yellow in it, you can get probably a 2-carat diamond for a nickel. Well, not quite, but you get the idea. But if you want a flawless, what they call white diamond, no flaws in it, you can get a 1/2 carat for, who knows, I haven't priced them out in a long time. Maybe it's $1,000. I don't know. But whatever it is, right? And so the higher the quality, the more the quantity. And that's the way it is in life. So I want to close this podcast out and say, listen, if you want to be great, it's a good thing. If it's a good thing, learn how to serve. You serve by giving value, a lot of value. And then you price the value you offer accordingly. And value, by the way, is in the eye of the beholder. Then secondly, if you want to be first, become a doulos. Recognize that when I'm in business, when I'm going out in the marketplace, when I'm making calls on people, recognize always that you were bought with a price, that you have a master. His name is Jesus Christ. He loves you and he has things for you to do. And you follow him. That, my friend, is the highest form of success. I know if you will follow those two things in business, the service with the idea of creating value, a high level of value, and pack as much value as you possibly can at a cost to benefit ratio that is ideal. Because there's this thing, cost to benefit ratio, like let's say this is the value or the benefit, right? And this is the cost of both $1,000. And you say, well, I'm going to charge $2,000. As I said earlier, it doesn't work so well. You say, I'm going to charge $10 or a penny. It doesn't work too well. Where is that number? It's someplace in here, and it's at a point where the person looking at this, making the decision, feels like, that's a good deal. I'd be an idiot. I'd be a fool. I'd be making a mistake to not take you up on that offer. That's what you want to do. Anyway, friends, that's enough for now. If you'd like to know more about what I do, you can certainly go to my site, michaelpink.com. You can reach out to us by email, mpink@michaelpink.com. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to learn how to 10x your business and actually want some help doing it, we've got a great team that'll actually help you do that. So drop a line, let us know what you think of the podcast, of the video, and of everything we're doing. All right, thanks so much, and God bless you.